I want to thank Jonathan for referring me to that clip. It's beautiful. And John Rutter has been the foremost choral composer and arranger in the world for a number of years now. He was asked one time on 60 Minutes on television whether he was a religious person. That's how the interviewer put it, because nearly everything he writes is very spiritual, like that. He's written a lot of Christmas carols. He's just very much into that. And his response was, no, I don't consider myself a religious person at all. But I believe in a God that works in the universe. If you want to take another look at the clip, I refer you to YouTube. You'll find it by looking up the title, Look at the World, and you can view it to your heart's content, okay? In the beginning, mankind's been trying to answer or complete that phrase since the beginning of his experience, mankind's experience on this earth. Adam didn't have any trouble figuring out what the completion of the phrase was. But many people since then have pondered the question and come to all sorts of different conclusions. There are some who say, well, in the beginning it's matter. Matter as in the substance of which things are composed. Well, matter takes many different forms, and the more they study matter, the more they discover they don't know all about it. And that begs the question, well, where'd the matter come from in the first place? I got on the internet the other day and I was looking at something that NASA is doing right now. They're trying to put a new space telescope into orbit. It's been delayed several times. They think now in 2019 it might be launched. But right there on their website, the question is raised, what will this new telescope see? And their answer is, it will see to the ends of the universe, to the beginning of the universe. It will see all the way to the Big Bang. They literally use that phrase on their website. There are some who have taken a different tack. They've looked at the world around them and the universe and said, well, really, in the beginning, man. That's where it's all at. Yeah. Or they've concluded, alternatively, in the beginning, there was no beginning. There are actually people who say, well, it's beyond knowing. No beginning. But then in this book, and in the minds and hearts of Christians everywhere, as well as members of some other religions of the world, in the beginning, God. Now, they don't all agree with how that beginning came about. And all those who say in the beginning God don't agree in terms of when it came about. And they don't all agree about whether or not God is active today in that creation. But they do conclude in the beginning, God. So let's look at it. You know the text well. In the beginning, God what? Created the heavens and the earth. In Isaiah, thus says the Lord, heaven is my what? Throne, and earth is my footstool. And by the way, the time is coming when earth will be his throne. I look forward to that day. Man has been looking for as long as he has had the technology and the tools to do so, and even before that, when he simply looked up at the sky, he's been looking to try to understand more about that beginning. And you recognize images like these. Here's one of Earth, taken from one of the shuttle missions. You recognize our planetary system, fairly limited in terms of what has been seen early in the experience of scientists. You will recognize any number of the planets from these photos, I'm sure. But that's not my focus right now. Because as man looked at these planets in our planetary system, he looked beyond, and he couldn't count the stars. He couldn't decipher what he saw. So he began to build telescopes and mount them on places that were far away from light, typically mountaintops. But atmospheric interference and other things had their limitations. He was seeing further, but still limited. And then one day, this device was launched. The first large space-based optical telescope, named after American astronomer Edwin Hubble. It was launched in April of 1990 from the Space Shuttle Discovery. It's 43 and a half feet long, 14 feet in diameter. It weighs 13 and a half tons. It was sent to an altitude of 340 miles. It orbits the Earth every 95 minutes at speeds of 17,000 miles per hour. And it began, after launch, to take pictures. There had been several missions back to the Hubble to repair one thing or another or add additional capabilities. In order to take images of distant faint objects, the Hubble must be extremely accurate. And that telescope is able to lock onto a target. Listen to this. This just blows me away. The telescope's able to lock onto a target without deviating more than 7/1000th of an arc second. Now, to translate that in something we understand, that's about the width of a human hair seen at a distance of 1 mile. In other words, that's a pretty stable telescope up there in space. And the results have been phenomenal. I'm not going to describe each of these slides. I'm just going to run through a few as examples. These are shots sent back to Earth by the Hubble. Pretty amazing, wouldn't you say? But even so, the Hubble still takes pictures like that. It sees so much further than any telescope previously, and then it sees beyond that to countless stars. When I look at those pictures, well, scientists begin to talk about the origin of the universe and how this exploded and that exploded and some big bang happened out there. What I see there is what David declared without the aid of a telescope centuries ago. The heavens what? Declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Can anyone hide himself in secret places so that I shall not see him, says the Lord? Do I not fill heaven and earth, says the Lord? Or this, he shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble. He commands the sun, and it does not rise. He seals off the stars. He alone spreads out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. He made the Bear, Orion, and the Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. And by the way, that's a Hubble photograph of Orion in the background. He does great things past finding out. Yes, wonders without number. So, man wants to see further still. And the James Webb Space Telescope is being readied for launch. It's bigger. It looks strange compared to Hubble. It has a sun shield, that device, that shroud, if you will, below it. The telescope is the upper part. But that sun shield is 70 by 48 feet, about the size of a tennis court. The telescope itself is 21.6 feet in diameter. They cut the weight way back on this one. They wanted something that they could get further out into space, and so it's going to literally be folded inside the rocket ship. And then it will be unfolded when it arrives at its destination. And where is its destination? Well, the Hubble is at 340 miles from Earth. This telescope they intend to place into orbit around the sun, 940,000 miles from Earth. They won't be taking a shuttle to fix it anytime soon. It'll take about a month to arrive at its destination. And it will remain fixed relative to the Earth because it will orbit around the sun the same way the Earth. It's fascinating to me. It has to be cold to operate correctly. It's an infrared telescope. And the operating temperature, the ideal operating temperature is minus 387 degrees Fahrenheit. Space will help with that. The shrouds, the protective material you see underneath it will help with that. They will see even more than these pictures reveal, because these are still Hubble pictures. As amazing as that universe out there is, through the eye of a telescope, There's ample evidence of a creator on an earthly scale. All around us, right out there. And this morning I thought I would call attention to a few examples in nature that speak clearly to me of intelligent design, of a creator's power. There are so many of them, but I've picked just a few. Do you recognize the Australian incubator bird? I had occasion to watch them a number of years ago when I visited Australia. This bird is somewhat like our wild turkeys. It weighs 3 to 4 pounds, like a small turkey. Some native Australians actually call it the brush turkey. The incubator bird is unique in the bird world. All birds use body heat to incubate their eggs, except this one. Instead of using its own body heat, as does a chicken, for example, the incubator bird uses fermentation, some solar heat, and even heat produced by volcanic action in places to incubate. The female's responsible for 2 activities. She's the one in the bottom right in that picture. First, she tests the nest to be sure it's adequate for incubating her eggs, because she has to have those eggs at a just right temperature for them to hatch. The nests typically can be as much as 3 feet into the ground. They can extend 15 or more feet above ground. They can be up to 50 feet across. And Dad, the male, is responsible for building those monstrous nests. And what should happen if Mama rejects the first effort? He builds another one. I want to show you a picture of one such nest. Those are people on top of it. If she accepts the nest, the second responsibility of the female is performed. She lays 20 to 35 eggs at the rate of 1 egg every 3 days, and she lays these for up to 7 months. Each egg weighs about a half a pound. It's as large, just about as large as an ostrich egg. And when she's done, she leaves the nest, never to return. She takes no part in incubation. She takes no part in raising the chicks. Dad comes back. And he's responsible for maintaining the proper temperature. For those chicks to survive, they demand a precise temperature of 91 degrees. And if he wants those chicks, those eggs to hatch and those chicks to survive, he will not let the temperature vary more than 1 or 2 degrees on either side of 91. And the question is, how does Daddy Bird maintain a consistent temperature in a mound of decaying plants and sticks and dirt? Well, scientists really don't know how he measures the temperature. Some think the bird has a thermometer built into its beak. Others believe the tongue can distinguish 91 degrees. My question has to be, when I think about this, how could a bird evolve the ability to precisely measure temperatures with its beak or tongue? Because while it's experimenting with that ability, developing that ability, the species doesn't continue. The male digs down in the nest, he checks the temperature. On hot days, he may pile extra sand on top to shield it from the sun. He may even rearrange the whole pile of rotting leaves and grasses several times a day. On cooler days, he pushes material off the top of the nest to permit more sunlight to penetrate. He keeps the humidity at around 99.5%. He even is known to dig some conical holes toward the eggs to get moisture deeper in the nest. The chick must get enough air to breathe too. And the father provides the fresh air as he digs down to the eggs. Remember, the eggs were laid over a period of time, so the young are coming along all the time, the chicks. When the hen lays an egg, it's filled with very tiny holes called pores through which the little embryo breathes. And as the chick grows, it can't get enough air from those cones necessarily that Dad has provided. So it begins to remove the inside layer of the shell, and as it thins out the shell, the holes get bigger, moving up the cone, and the chick gets more air. Incubator birds hatch able to fly with full feathers. Once they hatch, it takes them about 3 days to dig their way out of the mound. How do they know which way is up? How do they know which way is out? How do they know which way to dig? They've not been instructed by any of the parents. They lie on their backs and they dig until they break out. And once they're out, they're on their own. They're not fed or cared for by either parent. And when they are mature, the male will find a female friend and build her a nest, a huge nest, a precise mound, able to maintain 91 degrees temperature, and he'll do that without any instruction from his parents. The incubator bird is one of the reasons I believe in the beginning God. Let's try another one. The giraffe. A bull reticulated giraffe can be about 18 feet tall. The largest ever recorded was 20 feet tall and weighed 4,500 pounds. Scientists tell me that a bull giraffe heart can weigh up to 25 pounds. That'd be kind of tough for us to carry around, wouldn't it? A heart at 25 pounds. The heart of a giraffe, a reticulated giraffe, can be almost 2.5 feet long. It's a powerful pump. And when it squeezes, it shoots that blood up a long, skinny neck against gravity. The neck on a reticulated giraffe is roughly half of the giraffe's height. But Mr. Giraffe has a problem. He likes to get drinks of water occasionally. And he lowers that head down fairly rapidly to the water below. And scientists have puzzled about that and said, well, with all that blood, the heart is squeezing to the top of his head. When he puts his head down, that blood's going to go zoom and no more giraffe. So scientists, some scientists anyway, would have us believe that the giraffe, as he evolved, had to have been thinking, I've got a problem. When I get a drink of water, I'll at least have a disastrous headache, but I may be dead, so I better evolve something here to fix it. No. Of course, dead animals don't evolve. So what does he do? Well, these diagrams are an attempt to illustrate that he has some little spigots in his neck every so often. And those spigots are like little valves in the artery. And they control, when the giraffe's head is down, there's also a sponge under the brain, and it gently expands to protect the brain. So the giraffe gets a drink of water, and let's say he sees a lion coming. So he raises his head quickly. I have trouble just getting out of bed, and I don't have a 10-foot neck. Can you imagine? But the giraffe will jump up and run off because of that valve system. It works both ways. The giraffe doesn't pass out because as he raises his head, our Creator has made it so those valves open up and the sponge under the brain gently squeezes that last pump of oxygenated blood into his brain, and well, he does just fine. The question I have is, how could that evolve over time? I believe only God could have created that. The woodpecker, he's a special little guy. Actually, there are a lot of woodpeckers. Central Oregon is the location in North America with the most species of woodpeckers. Did you know that? We have about 13 species of woodpeckers in Central Oregon. And they have some things in common. This is a downy woodpecker. He's about 7 inches long, and he weighs about 1 ounce. But then we also have pileated woodpeckers around. And he's about 2 feet long, and he weighs about 10 ounces. And then we have a bunch of woodpeckers in between, size-wise. The beak of a woodpecker is industrial strength. It's stronger than any other bird's beak. He even has special feet, a woodpecker does. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them have 3 toes out front and just 1 toe out back. Most birds do. But the woodpecker has 2 toes out front and 2 toes out back. And that's so he can more readily climb a tree, and he can do so right side up or upside down or sideways or any way he jolly well wants to. He even has special tail feathers. If you were to see one of those or handle it up close, you would discover that the tail feathers are very, very stiff. They're pointed typically on the end quite a bit. They're more resilient, they're spongy, but they're extremely strong. And that's because he tripods himself on the side of a tree with his feet, and his tail feathers into the trunk below to allow himself to hang on. Then when he's ready to go, he spreads his tail feathers a little bit, braces himself, grabs hold, or I should say he is grabbing hold, and he begins to do this. He bangs his head into the tree so fast that it's hard to take a picture of him. Have you ever wondered why woodpeckers don't get headaches? They have the thickest skull per body weight of any creature on earth. There is a shock absorber between the beak and the skull, and their eyes are protected by automatically closing at each impact. Now, this is hard for me to imagine because the pecking is so fast, but every time it strikes the tree, its eyes are closed, and when the bill comes back, its eyes open, and it's all appears to be automatic. To allow it to focus, to aim its beak, and then somehow it closes its eyes, hits the tree with its beak again. Scientists have measured the force of the impact of a bird's head against a hardwood tree, and they have concluded that the force is so powerful that if the bird did not close its eyes, it would actually lose them. They would pop out of their sockets. Well, I guess my question is, how do those things evolve? One wonders, because if they don't evolve quickly enough, essentially instantaneously, pecking on a tree can be a life-threatening experience. Now that the woodpecker has the absorber, it still needs to get food out of the tree, and that's when its tongue comes into play. And this to me is mind-boggling. Woodpeckers, different species, have different patterns of the routing or the pathway of the tongue. They have common elements, but I want to show you generally what happens with the Eurasian green woodpecker. This bird is found in Europe, as you might expect from its name, sometimes called the European green woodpecker. The tongue of some woodpeckers, including this one, does not come from its throat up into its mouth like other creatures. If you were to go to a bird rehab center and take a look at a woodpecker that is taking some food from one of its keepers, you would be absolutely blown away with how far that tongue comes out of the beak. Inches, typically. I don't know if you can see it well, but the blue line represents where the tongue goes inside the head of this woodpecker. You notice it starts at the back of its throat. It goes around, inside of course, but around its skull, to the back of its neck. It goes up over the head. It drops down between the eyes. It passes through its nostrils, and then it emerges through its beak. Why? Well, scientists have some ideas, but they're still really trying to figure it out. Does the Creator have a sense of humor? No one really knows. How would this evolve? And from what ancestor did the woodpecker inherit its special beak? Interesting questions to me. Truly fascinating. Evidence of intelligent design at work. Evidence of a creator at work. Another one, just two more, I think, three possibly. The black-poll warbler. That little bird, male on the left, female on the right, that little bird is 5 inches long. It weighs 0.5 ounces. You can mail 2 of these for the price of a single stamp. Okay. They breed from western Alaska to Hudson Bay to northern New England. In other words, up north. They winter along the Amazon River in South America. Now that alone isn't unusual. There are a lot of birds that migrate north to breed, and then in the fall they return to the Southland. But what amazes me about the blackpoll is the difference between spring and fall migrations. Do you see the arrows on the left headed up or toward the center of the picture? Blackpolls migrate generally in that pattern, headed north. And while it's quite a little distance across the water there to Cuba, for example, or Jamaica, the fact of the matter is that it's more realistic and doable. But they've discovered that a large percentage of blackpolls in the fall take that route out to sea. Now, what does that tell me? Well, they travel 3,000 miles, some of them starting in Alaska, across North America to the Atlantic, 2,000 miles over open ocean, and 1,500 miles further to western Brazil. A total trip of 6,500 miles for a 5-ounce bird. That's 2,000 miles over water, 40 to 50 hours of nonstop flying, 20 wing beats per second at up to 5,000 feet altitude. Their wings will have flapped over 3 million times with no rest, no refueling, not even a drink. If burning gasoline instead of body fat, the blackpoll warbler could boast of 720,000 miles per gallon. And scientists tell me, oh, that just evolved. I wonder about those first blackpolls that headed out to sea. How'd they know where they were going? What made them think they could make it 2,000 miles in one shot? How about this creature? Half-inch bug. The bombardier beetle. They actually shoot their enemies. If a frog or a spider or a hop toad gets close to them, they shoot them with fiery hot acid. And they do this by mixing some chemicals that, in fact, if they were to mix them and shoot them the wrong direction, they would kill themselves. When it first mixes, it has 2 little sacs, if you want to call them that, on its body, that each have a different chemical in them. And when they first mix them, they don't do anything. But there's a third sac that has a catalyst in it. And when they inject a little bit of that into the mix, an explosion occurs. Now, if the bombardier beetle didn't have more equipment than that, he'd splatter himself, and of course, splattered bug pieces don't evolve. And that would be the end of bombardier beetles. But he's still around because he has an asbestos-lined tube that has on the end of it 2 turrets, movable turrets, a gun to shoot these little balls of chemical, of fire. He can aim them in any direction. This picture illustrates one direction. He's shooting from his tail turrets right between his legs out to the front. He can shoot out the back, out the side, out the front, wherever he decides to aim those guns. And when you hear one in a lab or in the field, you hear a little pop. An explosion. But scientists recorded the pops and put them in slow motion. And they discovered that they're really a sequence of booms. But to our hearing, they just sounded like one. The beetle has these tiny little feet, and if he shoots, let's say, out the side, and he goes bang, his feet couldn't hold on. And, if the bang were too big, it would literally propel him, and he'd be out of control. So in the meantime, he's able to control those little explosions, and there are multiple ones that appear to us to be all at once, but individually they aren't so strong that they cause the little bombardier to lose his footing. This is an example of a creature whose defense mechanism is what some scientists call irreducibly complex. In other words, without all of the individual parts to this bomb-making machine, this bomb-shooting machine, without all the individual parts, it doesn't work. So if you're going to evolve one part and then try to evolve another part over a few thousand or a million years and try to evolve another part, really? Takes more faith to believe in that than to believe in a creator God. They'd have to all be working together to be fully functional. No question about it. When I look at the world around me, even the little world all around me, I can answer that phrase in the beginning, God. God. I'd like for you to sing about that God. He's every bit as concerned about us as he is about this creation of his that we see all about us. And we have a song that was sung 2 weeks ago, and some of you know it. We're going to have some folk come up and lead us in it. And we're going to sing a Stuart Hamblin song written in 1959 that captures the bigness of God. So if